If you aren't living under a rock, you've definitely heard of the genre of funk, but did you know there's actually a bunch of different subgenres of this subgenre? So in today's video, I'm going to be going over exactly how to make all the main styles of funk, starting with funk. Just classic regular funk. I know most of you guys are probably here for, your drift funk, your house funk, or whatever the fuck else you hear on TikTok, and we'll get into that in a bit. But you kind of have to understand the regular funk sound first before we get into all these other ones, because it's actually very different back in the day. Funk is a subgenre of rap which is directly inspired by another genre known as underground Memphis rap, which was popular all the way back in the 90s. Memphis rap was pioneered by influential artists such as 3 6 Mafia and DJ Paul. Shout out ChatGPT for that. So now that you understand the sound of Memphis rap, let's get into funk music. In the early 2010s, this new genre known as funk started to emerge, mostly on YouTube and later on SoundCloud. It was popularized by people such as DJ Smokey and Space Ghost Perp. Funk consists of vintage jazz, or funk, not funk, samples, drum patterns very similar to Memphis rap, as well as a lo-fi gritty mix. Funk would also sample vocals from those 90 Memphis rap songs, mainly from some of the artists we talked about previously. So now that you understand that, let's get into this beat. Just through scrolling through the depths of YouTube playlists, I very quickly found this sample, and this is what it sounds like, already chopped up and put onto tempo. In funk music, the mix is a very defining part of it, so I'm going to show you some of the effects I added on both the sample and the master. On the sample, I just have an EQ. Basically, all of your low end's going to be taken out in all types of funk, just to leave room for the 808 and kick, because those are very important parts of funk. And then I just have the high end taken out just a little bit, just to give it that lo-fi feel. I have a little bit of reverb just to, make it a little bit spacious. And I have this free plugin called Crush, which is just a bit crusher plugin. The only similar thing that's stock is this plugin effector right here. Now for the master channel, always soft clipper on the bottom. I also have an EQ just boosting some of the highs just to make it a little bit crispy. Now depending on what type of beat it is, sometimes you actually want to take out the highs. The EQ really just depends on the song. Then I have Crush again to give it that lo-fi gritty feel. So with the master mixed and the sample mixed, this is what we have now. Now we're going to get into the drums. The drums are very simple, but there's a few things that are very popular in these funk tracks. So we just have like regular snare patterns, but in this counter snare, notice towards the end there's some type of roll. This is in almost every funk song. And then in the later part, I have this switch up. Other than that, it's just bouncy hats, bouncy kicks, just pretty typical patterns. In the second half, we added this open hat and this bell. In a lot of funk songs, as well as the other types we'll get into, there's always some type of like hat or just high-end sound that's constantly playing over and over again. Finally, the 808. Didn't want something too distorted on here, but I just kept it in key with the sample and followed the kick pattern. In terms of mixing, the drums have that gritty sound just because of what I had in the master, so there's not too much for the mixing for the actual drums. For the 808 though, I just have this preset from my kit, which we'll get into in a bit. Just a compressor, EQ, taking out a lot of the high end because I wanted a very clean, just deep 808. And then a limiter, which is sidechain from the kick to the 808. That's especially important in this. And now, before we play the final beat, the last thing that ties it all together is going to be the Memphis vocal. So I used 2 different samples on this track, one for the first half, which is this. Then for the second half, it's this vocal. And all together, this is what we have. Before we get into the rest of the video, I want to quickly go over the drum kit that I've been referencing throughout most of this video. Metamorphosis is my brand new Memphis and funk-based drum kit. This kit consists of over 50 808s, over 150 drum samples, an entire MIDI kit, mixing presets, percussion loops / song starters. I even threw in my bonus Memphis stash, which is over 400 Memphis vocals and 200 cowbells. This is all for the price of $30, but for the first 10 people who buy the kit and use code CYPHEL50 at checkout, get 50% off their entire order. This kit has some pretty unique sounds because I've developed my own sauce for these Memphis beats over the past few months, so you're definitely going to stand out from the crowd with this one. And on top of that, I threw in the FLPs from the beats I made today just in case anybody wanted to see them. So that's the last time I'm going to sell you this. Cypher.store is my kit store. Link in the description for the Metamorphosis kit. And I'll see you guys in the video. Now let's get into drift funk. This is what all you fucking TikTok kids want. So, drift funk is a subgenre of funk that emerged in Russia in the late 2010s using similar concepts as regular funk, such as Memphis samples and a gritty mix, except in this music, it's even grittier. Heavily distorted 808s is its main feature, and the use of the 808 cowbell sound, which we are going to hear a lot in these next couple beats. So this is a MIDI from my kit, and this is what it sounds like. Very fast-paced, high-tempo cowbell melody. In terms of the mix, again, always gonna take out the low end, boosted the highs just to make it sound a little sharper, a little bit of reverb always doesn't hurt, and then stereo shaper to make it a little wider. This is another master from my kit. I'm not gonna show it, but it's just Maximus EQ. I tried to make all the mixing presets stock plugin friendly, or at least free plugin friendly, so they should be easy for you guys to use. Throughout the beat, I have a lot of variations of the cowbell melody. So starting with the snares, I kept it very simple. Just 2 snares from my kit layered on top of each other. Along with this preset from my kit, just an EQ, distortion, and reverb, just to make it a little bit crispier. For the hats, again, just another bouncy pattern. There's nothing too complicated with these beats. You just kind of go with the rhythm. You guys should know how to make hat patterns by now. Again, with the repetitive high-end stuff, I have an open hat and a bell. Kicks, bouncy like last time. On the kicks, there's just crush, again, the free bit crusher, and then an EQ taking out some of the high end. And now for the 808s, they're a lot more distorted than they were last time, but I just followed the kicks again. And I have a few distortion plugins, bit crushers on the 808. That's another preset from the kit. I know I'm gonna mention the kit a lot in this video, but everything's from it. So with the drums and melody, this is what everything sounds like so far. But I added a few more things to really just bring everything together. You could add the Memphis vocal throughout the track. I decided not to on this one, but I did have a little bit of a Memphis vocal before the drop. This one right here, everybody uses this Memphis vocal, but
Project Pat don't give a fuck.
and then that's layered with the classic money counter sound.
Project Pat don't give a fuck.
And then the final thing, just to give it some depth and just fill in some of the background space, I added this percussion loop, which is going to be underneath everything. So this is what the final beat's going to sound like.
Project Pat don't give a fuck.
Now we're going to talk about house funk. Apparently the drift shit was like 2 years ago. Now this is what everybody likes on TikTok. But I'm not going to give like a super long explanation like the last two. House funk has come up in the last, 2 to 3 years. And it's very similar concepts to drift funk, like the cowbells and distorted 808s, except it's at a house tempo and house rhythms. So we are at 116 BPM, and I laid down this, which is from my kit again. Now the mix is really going to transform this one. Again, I have my master. This one I'll actually get into at the end, but on the cowbell, I have EQ again, kickstart, which is basically just a side chain, and then I have Valhalla Simmer, which is like just like big reverb plugin. Now for the kick, you just started with the 4 on the floor kick. Of course, layering that with the 808s. A tip I could give for the 808s, sometimes these cowbell melodies are a little bit weird, like the actual sample isn't playing the right note. so the actual cowbell sound won't play C even if you put it to C. So for the 808s, I just go by ear for what sounds good. I don't actually copy the notes of the cowbells because sometimes just things are off key and it's a little bit weird with these funk beats. So now let's get into the snare, just the basic pattern. Followed by this open hat. Followed by these hats. All together, this is what that sounds like. Now for a second, I want to talk about the master. I didn't get into that earlier. For this, it's just a soft clipper, EQ, and then I have this plugin here, which a lot of funk people use. It's called OTT. It's just a compressor. I don't know why, but just everyone in the funk community uses it. I don't really have any tips for it. I just kind of mess around with the settings. It's a free plugin again. I really try to keep this, stock or free plugin friendly, just for everybody who can't afford paid plugins. And I just messed around with the settings on here until it sounded good. This is what it sounds like without the master for reference, and with it. Other than that, I added a few sound effects throughout just to, give it some arrangement, just so it's not like the same thing repeating over and over again. I didn't add a Memphis vocal, but that is something you can do. I just felt like it didn't need it. First thing I added was this reverb snare transition. I don't really know what to call it. And then here I have this transition followed by a reverse kick. So that was the house funk beat. Now we're gonna get into Brazilian funk. This one's a little controversial. Again, this one is huge on TikTok right now. And I don't even know if you can consider this funk because it really doesn't carry a lot of those elements from the older funk music. The only thing I would say it has in common is that they use the cowbells, but as we saw in the original funk, that funk doesn't need cowbells. So this one's a little bit different, but I'm gonna get into this song that I made. I'm gonna break it down for you guys. For Brazilian funk, on this track, we have a bunch of different vocal samples, and they're not Memphis vocal samples, they're just Brazilian vocal samples. So this is an example of what the first one sounds like. Here's another one.
Hoje eu tô facinho, hoje tá aqui o bagulho é doido. Hoje eu tô facinho, hoje e não vai botar a cara.
After you got your vocal loops, then you use percussion loops. I'll be fully transparent, these aren't from my kit, and my kit isn't really Brazil based, it's more Memphis based, drift funk, house funk, regular funk. So if you were interested in the Brazil stuff for the kit, that's going to be in a future release, but I'll still include the FLP and I'll still show you guys how to make it in this video. So I had a bunch of different vocal loops, a bunch of different percussion loops. Now for the actual producing stuff, we're not just going to use loops this whole time. I'll just start at the beginning and break it down section by section because this one is really confusing. So in the intro, I have a riser and just the vocals. Next section starts with the transition sound, 2 transition sounds, the percussion loop, the vocal loop like we saw before, and then a couple new things. Instead of cowbells, there are cowbells later on, but these Brazil songs use these almost EDM-like stabs, and these sound like this. Followed by just fat kicks, like the kicks just take over the whole mix. The next section is the build up to the drop. So this has the cowbell melody fading in, layered with the stab. There's not much to explain here, it's just kind of rising up with a new vocal sample again. And a transition. For the drop, I made it more house inspired, which a lot of Brazil songs don't have, but I just wanted to do my own thing on this. Then that's layered with the stabs and the cowbells. And then later on, there's a few more variations of this melody. Overall, this is the drop section. For the section after the drop, we have a variation of the melody. So I'll just go over to those very quickly, but it's all the same concepts of just vocal samples, percussion loops, the stab and cowbell melody, then like super hard kicks, 808s. It's all like the same thing. It's a little bit of a mess. That's why it's kind of hard to explain, but you guys can see it. Then it goes back into the section from the beginning. And then this is the final drop. So that's the pattern. You kind of have to structure it like an entire song, not just a beat, so it's a little bit different. Now we're going to get into the mix. It looks like a lot. That's just because there's a lot of sounds, but a lot of them are unmixed. The master, again, always going to be some type of EQ. This is just boosting the high a little bit. The OTT plugin from before. Bass boost, just because the low end really hits on these beats. And EQ. Sound goodizer, but only for the house part, just to like really saturate it. I learned that from one of my producer friends. And then soft clipper, just because everybody uses that. And that's going to be the last style of funk I cover in this video. So overall, if there is a genre I missed, because I know funk is just such a huge genre nowadays, and I really only covered like the big TikTok ones. If there's another genre you want to see, comment it down below, and then I'll make a part 2 to this. Let me know what you guys want to see next on this channel. Click here to watch another video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.